you test the sound? Because it's a little bit far from me over here. I want to make sure I can still get it. Still good? Check, check. Sound check, check. I'm going to talk like this today. Is it good enough? Yeah? Okay. So we're ready to go. We're live.
We're live and there's 21:17 watching.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Having a nice yogi to yogi talk today. This is going to be a long one, so strap in. A lot of really amazing questions. You know, one of the signs of that a spiritual community as a group and as individuals is growing and developing and really getting, you know, some results, some fruit of the practice, understanding the view, especially understanding the view, which is great. But you can tell you're practicing too, is that the questions coming in are really great. Is that students understand what are the important things to inquire about. They've really begun to imbibe the view. They're really starting to get, oh, I see. This is what spiritual practice is actually about. This is what a path actually is. These are the things that really are important to guide me. And now I have questions about those things. And I think that's just a wonderful sign. And to be honest, I really hadn't had ever in 30 plus years of teaching Dharma, these kind of questions, this kind of amazing growth in a worldwide community. And I'm really excited about it and really happy about it. So without a question, the inquiries that are coming in this month are the deepest that I've seen yet, and they're touching on some very deep topics. It doesn't mean I want to discourage the beginners in the group that are listening now live from sending in your questions that are beginner questions. That's fine. I'm just making a comment about where I can see the overall development going, which is really wonderful. It's just so great to see it in you, and it's such a great thing for everybody. So what I want to say is we got a lot of good questions. I can't skip over any this time. They're just so good. And beginner and advanced questions. And I'm going to try to get through them all in 2 hours. Probably won't be able to unless something amazing were to happen with time warp. But I will probably do another session to answer the ones that weren't answered within probably 10 to 14 days. Just go live and do it. Kendra will send out a message and everybody will see it because they're just so worthy of it, and otherwise they'll stack up even more for next Yogi to Yogi. Okay. So Yogi to Yogi, this talk is about a pure practitioner, myself, giving you my experience as a Dharmacharya on the path, both as an Acharya and as a practitioner. And that's really a wonderful thing to be able to tap into, to be able to ask these kind of questions regularly to our teacher. I think it's indispensable, really fantastic. I used to fly long distances and wait for many days outside of many huts for answers to questions. And now you just pop online, which is so sweet. So I think that's really great. Here we are at the Costa Rica Trikamasa Yoga Retreat Center. And let's get started with these right away then. From Akita, I think from New York. Hi, Akita. I'm wondering if you could talk about the connection between Tantric Yoga, Dzogchen, and Taoist view. Right. That could take a wonderful book, actually. Great question. So let's just handle it in a very simple way. Tantra and Taoism had a back and forth relationship for a very long time. We could even say Vedic rishis and the primordial Taoist masters, the really old ones from this original tradition that I actually am certified in, authorized to teach from, called the Zhengyi Dao, the original Orthodox Dao, which was organized out of all the kind of shamanic Dao lineages that were around at the time. That there was originally this confluent or communication between those, what we call rishis, but loosely there were pre-Buddhist sages running all around India, Central Asia, Nepal, Western China. And you also had the Yongzhongbun, which were the primordial pre-Buddhist, shamanic, deity yoga-oriented, meditational practitioners of Tibet as well. And you had the beginnings of what was Taoism. You couldn't even call it Chinese Taoism yet because it was really Western Chinese, Central Asian Taoism at this time. Now, they all knew each other. To think they had these really separate camps was kind of ridiculous. We now know that there was a lot of travel that took place between ancient world's peoples, a lot of exchange of ideas and so on. So they all knew each other. That means when I'm giving you this historical piece of information about is that there's a basis for a sharing of view, a sharing of collective understanding of spiritual path, stages, practices, and so on. Fast forward to a little more modern times, and there were many Indians who went into China and became Taoist lineage masters. And there were many Chinese who came into India and became Indian tantric lineage masters. It's well recorded. So there was that exchange going on without a doubt. They had very similar understanding of view, of practice, and so on. One example would be that in China, there were no three-eyed gods, like no eye, third eye here, or inner Kriya Yoga type of practices with visualizations and so on, until the Indian Tantric Yoga came into China and started to influence how they were practicing. At that point, you had a lot more of these inner visualization and inner energy movement practices, which now in China are called Jindan and Neidan. But they used, it was really interesting, they used the Taoist kind of nature imagery, replacing a lot of the deities with nature imagery and nature experiences and elemental forces and so on. But it was basically founded on the same root, right? Very interesting. As far as Dzogchen goes with this mix, it's one of the ones that's really hard to understand and hard to place out of it. There's no hardcore history about it. So it's kind of interesting that it shares a lot of similarities with Kashmir Shaivism, except for the idea of a god. It shares a lot of similarities with Buddhism. Some would say it's perfectly, seamlessly part of Buddhism, but I have heard in private conversations and occasionally in a public lecture and occasionally in a book, great Dzogchen masters who were Buddhists or are Buddhists say that Dzogchen is not Buddhism. It is clearly not Buddhism. It is something, it's its own unique animal. It's compatible with Buddhism, doesn't contradict it, but it is not. So this is very interesting. There was a debate held in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery a long time ago in Tibet, where the Gelugpas, who were like the Protestant reformist of Tibet, were trying to expunge Dzogchen from the Nyingmapa tradition, the original Tantric Buddhist of Tibet, with the Nyingmapa school. And it had, this Dzogchen had been creeping into the Kagyu school, creeping into the Sakya school as well. And why? Because it's an amazing system of realization, a very advanced system, albeit you have to train in the Theravada Mahayana first. You have to have a lot of tantric training first before you go into it. Otherwise, you'll get really weird results that are, you'll think you're enlightened basically when you're not. But anyway, the Gelugpas, who were the reformists, the Dalai Lama school, this school came to be like the ruling school of Tibet through military force, actually. They had a debate, and one of the quotes I think so interesting and so telling historically about this is that the main prosecutor for the Gelugpa said, "We're not sure whether this Dzogchen you practice is Taoism from China or is Shaivism from Kashmir," right? And that's just an amazing line. And then the debate just rambles on from there. So they were saying, look, there's so much similarity between these two. We're not sure really what it is. Did you make it up? You know, that kind of thing. The oldest text we can find on Dzogchen is from 1000 Common Era. That's very recent. So, you know, where'd it come from? Who knows? No one really knows. So we can't really say, but once it came into existence, at least once it's accepted that it came into existence in its own form with text, around 1000 CE. Maybe there was earlier texts, they just haven't been found yet. Then we can say that there was, you know, an exchange between Dzogchen masters and Shaivist and Taoist for sure. So that's a bit of the connection. Basically, they're all connected back then. I can tell you from my experience, I had a lot of experience practicing in yogic areas, you know, areas of India where yogins gather. And there was often many Tibetan Buddhist yogins there, and Dzogchen yogins there. And, you know, the beautiful thing was nobody cared that I was a Shaivist and they were a Buddhist or a Dzogchenpa. No one cared. And if there was a Taoist who wandered all the way from China, they'd be welcomed as well, because philosophers argue and practitioners bow to each other. Real practitioners, because real practitioners are always going to agree on the higher stages of fruition. Slight differences in some of those stages, but they're going to agree on a lot of the high stuff. So we all recognize each other and recognize that the view is similar enough that we can all, love each other, get along, and practice really deeply. And I found it to be the case realistically when I was in India practicing with these other great traditions. And that's what led me to, along with my teachers urging, both teachers led me to understand the Mahasiddha tradition. It's not based on sectarianism. It's based on a result. Total unqualified liberation, which results in a rainbow light body. That's it. And everybody who's following it from all those traditions, those great traditions I just named, they're all doing that in their own way. Okay, let's move on there. So Akita, I hope that helps a little bit. I can't see it. Huh? Oh, the table's really shaky and I can't be hands-free. That's going to be, I'm getting warned off the table here. Okay, let's see if I can do this. That's a bummer. You can fix that by, okay. Anyway, the second one from Akita then, I started learning Tantric Yoga with Christopher Wallace. If you don't know, Christopher Wallace is a scholar of Sanskrit, has a degree in Sanskrit, and has forayed now into Tantric teaching and Tantric psychology, which seems more connected to Hinduism and deities. How is TMY path similar or different? TMY path is different than Hinduism and deities. I'm not sure if you're asking the difference between what we do and what Christopher teaches or what Hinduism and deities have to do with TMY. Let me answer both. So as far as what is different between TMY and general Hinduism and the deities, general Hinduism is, first of all, the word doesn't mean anything because there is no Hinduism. There are many, many different sects, different religious groups in India that all practice a sort of generalized philosophy, but in very specific and different ways. So that's the first thing. There is no Hinduism. That's a white person's label that was put onto those Hindi people, right? People who spoke Hindi a long time ago. But having said that, the generalized religion of India with all these different sectarian varieties is not what it used to be, right? It's not the rishis getting enlightened with light bodies anymore. It's not the Mahasiddhas getting enlightened with light bodies anymore. It is so rare that an Indian practitioner of Hindu deity yoga, et cetera, gets realized to these very high levels nowadays. Not to say that they don't reach stage 7 or 8 sometimes, yeah, but the higher levels of 9, 10, 11, 12, you rarely see now. Although there were some shining examples, of course, Ramana Maharishi and Nityananda Baba, amazing people. And I'm not at all knocking the sincerity of practice and the connection to the ancient roots of the more powerful systems that went before. But for India to survive so many centuries of Muslim subjective, repressive rule, British colonization as well, and to keep flourishing with their amazing systems that were giving great realization way back when, it's just not possible. Not possible. So nowadays, TMY, as far as relationship to Hinduism and deity yoga and so forth, can be said to be coming from the roots of it that are very pre-Muslim era, pre-British colonizing era. And that comes out in many of the ways that we interpret the scripture that was given to us over times. And maybe someday I'll get into that a little bit because I could offer a very different take on a lot of the sutras that people like Mr. Wallace and so forth are putting out there, or Dr. Wallace, I think he has a PhD now, are putting out there. So, and that's very interesting because I think we have something very fresh and real, which is ancient. The new thing is the old thing. That's the truth. That's what TMY is. So in the history of TMY, we've never lost continuity with the ancient understanding of what is a deity, what are the stages of the practice, and so on. To give you one example of the difference between the two, when it's going to come up on a video that I'm putting out soon about what is the importance of a spiritual path, the path itself. I get tons of questions from people. Tons of inquiries to so-called study with me, but they don't really want to study with me. What they want is, can you give me a mantra? Can you give me a deity practice? Can you give me initiation into this or that? And it's like pot shotting, trying to get a technique or something like that. That's not how the systems were ever developed, right? You need a real basic foundation that has to be very deep. You need realization of your true nature and what shunya actually is. And then you can make progress through deity yoga. Before that, you cannot make progress with deity yoga. You should not be receiving initiations in deity yoga. But now almost all of Hinduism is synonymous with mantras and deities. And people do pujas all the time, but they're clueless, honestly. And the results don't really give results. It's understandable that you feel connection to deities. I don't mean clueless that way. It's very real that you have connection to certain deities. I do, you do. But you have to receive the proper training to make use of that deity yoga in the right way, so it becomes something more than just making your ego more powerful, making your mind more powerful. In other words, that has to be based on your essence. And that's why these practices were given in high stage 5, not in 1, 2, 3, and 4, as they are now very commonly. So this is one way it's very different now. There's no, in general, in Hindu systems, there is no, and here I use that word, defaulting to it because it's all we can do. The Indian spiritual systems of development, there is really no systematic approach available in mass. Maybe you have pockets here and there where people are practicing something very old that goes systematic step by step, but it is extremely rare. In fact, so rare that I've only encountered it once and twice in all of India when I was going around by foot, practicing with yogins in all different places. And I ended up sitting down with those people, learning from them. There was the Agoris, and they still had a pretty good system intact. And there's the Shaktas that practice Sri Vidya from like Kavita Chinayan's, her lineage. That's intact. That's really nice. There's a few other little ones around, but they're not public. You certainly don't have learning portals developed by them and online presences and so forth, because the real stuff is very difficult to get out that way. That's why in TNY, we have a strict policy. We can only give level 1, possibly level 2 training by video, by this. And then you have to come to a retreat. And COVID, I know, has changed a bit of that for now, but it will never change the fact that it has to be given that way. Why? Because that's the only way that these real teachings and practices can be effectively transmitted and received, right? As soon as you commercialize it, as soon as you put it through the web, or anybody can do it without preliminaries, it all goes out the window. And everybody who is from a real tradition knows that. If they're not from a real tradition, they don't know that. They teach over the web, they teach everything, right? So basically, the Indian traditions now don't have a path. You go to these big yoga groups, you go to these retreats, all these workshops, and so on. And there's the big Mahaguru, yoga guru sitting there giving all these talks, but there's no system. There's really no system. There used to be, but there isn't anymore. So now it's ad hoc. There's this retreat on meditation. There's this retreat on mantras. There's this retreat on deities. There's this retreat. But where does it fall? How is it placed? How will it take me from A to Z? This is my major criticism of the Indian systems. And this is what leads to the guru as God. Even students projected onto me that I was some divine figure, that I was God. I didn't even realize it until my wife made me very aware of it. I had no idea. Instead of being a peer practitioner, practicing at the same level, being right down in the trenches with everybody, working with them, partying with them, doing whatever, people saw me and projected onto me as some kind of a divine being. We're all divine beings. We're all in a 12-stage view. I'm just a few stages ahead, and my teachers made me an acharya for that reason, and that's why I can guide you. But it doesn't mean that you should at all consider your teachers as a deity or as God. So in the Hindu thing, there's still an idea of God. In Trikamasa Yoga, there is no God. So when the guru is considered to be God, you have real trouble. Everything goes crazy. You get all this cult mind started, and nobody develops, right? So we have to avoid that like crazy. This all comes because there is no real powerful view teachings anymore that explain the system correctly and say, a guru isn't God. That's ridiculous. You know, a guru may be realized to some degree on the 12 stages, but there is no God. So how could they be God? And therefore, you should never get rid of your own authority, your own discernment, and you should be responsible for your relationship with a teacher, with a guru. You know, you can't blame a guru for something that you agreed to do, this practice or this way of living or whatever. That's on you. But when you make them God, then you can blame them for everything, right? Because God should know better. Really, you should know better. So let's be strong. Let's have responsibility for ourselves. And let's understand that. And let's not fall into that generalized Indian Hindu way of practice. It's not good. Now, in modern times, I've had a hard time thinking about who I could refer people to when they really have that pull to practice a real Indian style, not really Trikamasa yoga. They want to practice purely Indian tradition, you know, heavily focused on deity yoga. But thankfully, I can recommend Kavita for people that want to do that kind of, if you're into goddess worship, she's your lady. She's got a school set up. She's authorized to teach. She's a medical doctor in the world. She's, you know, very grounded, very real. I feel like she's my sister. She's fantastic. So I recommend her and her school if you want to go down the road of learning a puja, getting the mantras for it. The next puja, getting the mantras for it. The next puja, getting the mantras for it. Is this kind of a progressive way of practice within only Sri Vidya? She does it just within Sri Vidya. Yes, Trikamasa Yoga has way of water, but we combine it with a lot of meditation, and so does Kavita, but we combine it with specific meditations to our tradition, and the amount of pujas you would learn are less, and the steps are less in the way of water with Trikamasa Yoga. And it's a specific set of deities that are laid out that are both Shakta and Shaiva from my training with my gurus. So that is another way you can go. But so what I'm saying is, people who are not practicing in that generalized Malays kind of version of Hinduism are Kavita. So look her up if you want to go for her style, if that grabs you. Paul Muller Ortega is a scholar who turned teacher. But I appreciate Paul's work because it sticks very clearly to the Shaivist practices. He's put together a very clear system of practice. He's older. He's done the work. He's had his difficulties in life as a teacher and come through them. And he's not out seeking fame and glory. So I like his work a lot. If you're really into just Kashmir Shaivism and you believe there is a God that is Shiva, then go for Paul's work. I don't believe in a God, but if you believe in a God, you want to know there's a God or something, and you're into that Shaivism on that level, as some of you've written to me in TMY and said, when are we going to do the pure Shaiva stuff? Well, I go through some Shaiva texts, and Shaiva theory and method is all over our system, especially the beginner and intermediate. It's 90% Shaivism, Shakta Shaivism. But if you want to just be in that and have more of that meditational approach through Paul, then that's where you should go. I recommend him. Douglas Brooks, I don't know if he's still teaching, but he's very good also with Sri Vidya. He's in upstate New York, I think. Though he might have come out of the scene since one of his students had such a big fall. John Friend had a big fall, so maybe he came out of the scene a bit. Who is the other one I was going to recommend? It may come back to me. So there are some out there, and I'm becoming aware of them now, which is great. Okay. But anyway, these are some of the differences of generalized Indian practice systems now and working with deities. Now let's say something about working with deities in particular. So many times on a path, you do your foundation work in Tantra, and then you're introduced to deities. And then you use the deities' power of body, speech, and mind to infuse your own power of body, speech, and mind and wake up the enlightened capacities within you, so-called becoming the deity. And then many systems stop right there, where you're just in the completion phase of deity yoga. Other ones continue into higher forms of meditation. It depends who you're with. In the way of water from Trikamasa Yoga, it does follow that same path. Foundation work, deity yoga progressively with pujas, rituals, and then higher meditations where you go beyond being the deity and the deity is dissolved itself. And that's kind of rare. Now you get that in Vajrayana too. And that's why people say, oh, you're doing Vajrayana. I said, no, we're practicing the original tradition, which Vajrayana has stuck to actually as well. How is TMY different than what Christopher Wallace teaches? Well, we're really based on a lineage transmission. We're really based on all the stuff I learned from my teachers, which is so important. And having had a real relationship with my gurus and having been initiated by them ritually in front of people, this was witnessed, right? And then being graduated as an acharya and then being taught how to teach and being taught the text one by one and being taught the oral teachings one by one and going through years and years of practice and solo retreats being led by my teachers in their presence at their ashrams, at their monasteries, or back in my home retreat hut, So this is a difference. Christopher has studied a lot and has degrees and has felt the motivation and inspiration to now teach people spiritually, to give transmission of mantras and things like this, which is in the tantric. It's interesting because he teaches tantra, but to give the tantric initiations, one has to have had a guru. One has to have had done the practices and received those initiations themselves into those mantras and deities, perform those practices of mantra and deity until you get the fruit, confirmed by your own guru, and then told you can teach it. So it's kind of interesting. It seems to be traditional, non-traditional in a sense. So there's some big differences. Christopher's not big on guru lineage. Christopher's not big on having a practice history himself. So, there's some big differences. Whatever. Just do what's good for you. Do what you like. Do what appeals to you. These are the differences, yeah? Number 3 from Akita. but for everybody. Can you talk about the practice of connecting with gods and goddesses? Okay, so we can't say much about it. In the way of water, we go into it in much detail. You connect with gods and goddesses to invoke a divine mandala, to bring this divine mandala down into this world. In the ancient way of Taoism and the texts, the most ancient texts and the ancient teachings, oral teachings from Taoism, we would make offerings and be penetrated by the different gods and goddesses. They would just come down and penetrate our body, and they would take up residence in our body, and we would have then a body of multiple gods and goddesses, the whole body replete with them. This was very common in many ancient systems of the world. It was common in Hawaii and Persia and so many places. And it was no different in India. People were connecting to the deities, getting possessed by the deities, eventually got refined into drawing down a mandala of the deity and becoming that deity and living in that mandala so that your body, your speech, and your mind all were extensions of that deity. Okay? So that is a part of our practice for people who want to practice the way of water, right? And even in the way of fire, in Kundalini Hatha Yoga, we do certain abhishekams or empowerments of certain deities. Why? Because the yoga path was not just doing yoga, huff and puff and breathe and meditate. It never was without contextualization with deity yoga and mantra and meditation all in there. And that's how I learned it too. So in specific phases of your practice, you're initiated into specific deities because they represent those stages. And the mantra you receive, which is the energy body of the deity, represents your energy at that stage, how it should be. So if you do the mantra, that's the energy of your body, energy at that stage, of your mind at that stage. And it purifies the energy which is not that stage from the lower stages. So in other words, you get purified by the deity's own energy body, which is their mantra and the visualization, because now you're entering that stage yourself. So it's like a confirmation of moving into this stage and a way to reify the experience of that stage through the energy body of the deity, right? So this is an important thing that happens step by step in Kundalini Hatha Yoga as well. Good questions. Number 4, on God. Many of us are taught that there must be a soul expressing as me and a supreme soul, a God or higher creative intelligence in spiritual traditions. Does the fear of letting go of this concept relate to the fear of annihilation of self? That is so beautifully put, Akita. The answer is in your question. You've hit it on the head. The fear of letting go of the concept of a God is the fear of letting go of the concept of your soul. And we have a lot of concept around this, a lot of security invested in this experience. There's a God to take care of me someday, or I'm part of this one homogenized soup of a God. And no matter what I do, no matter how I screw up, I'll always get back to that experience. Well, that's not Trikamahasana Yoga. That's not what a lot of systems believe. That's not what Buddhism believes, or Vajrayana, or Bun, or Dzogchen, or even Taoism. So like, wow. So you're really way out on your own if you believe that there is a God. You're way out on your own if you believe that no matter how you screw up in life, you'll always get realized at some point in the future. You'll always attain enlightenment at some point in the future. It's not how it's understood in these other traditions. We have a responsibility to become enlightened ourselves through our own self-work, not just through the grace of some deity, not through the grace of some guru. We have to do it ourselves. We have to be guided correctly, taught correctly. That's all important. That's why we have guru disciple systems and the path itself. But yes, we're afraid to let go of our self-concept. And even the subtle sense of God as an eternal reality is a concept. Nothing is eternal, nothing. So if God's not eternal, you certainly aren't eternal, right? So that's not how it works. Eternality has to do with the extreme view of time. There is no time like that. An extreme view of time is what gives rise to materiality. This is time, my body, the objects in the room. This is what time actually is. So all of this is really ephemeral and very much like a dream. There is no findability, as one teacher I read recently said. There's no way to find a self or to find a God, a one God that rules over everything. There's many gods just like us, but they're temporary as well. So yes, there is a huge fear of annihilation. It was covered in a thread recently on Trikamahasana Yoga Facebook group, because I think this is what holds people back the most. And I think this is one of the main difficulties for practitioners of Shakta Shaiva traditions today. the clinging to a self. I think a lot of people who teach today, especially those who didn't have a guru and disciple training, who didn't get throttled by the guru and opened into their own emptiness beyond everything, which is stage 7 in Trikamasa Yoga view, the true emptiness, the true spaciousness, which is not a thing, but negates everything in a sense in that way. If we haven't gone through that first, we're never going to know our true nature. We're never going to understand what spontaneity means, how things can arise from nothing and dissolve back into actually nothing, because they're not really arising as substantial. They're abhasa, as we would say. In ancient Sanskrit, Shaivism was called appearances, right? But in Shaivism, they thought these appearances arise and dissolve back into Shiva, which is like a something that is a nothing. But that's also still a concept, right? That's why Trikamasa Yoga goes beyond that view. Okay, so you nailed it on the head. What was my shift? What was my journey of shifting? Well, she's asking me, what was your journey of shifting from gods exist to no gods exist? My journey was discovering that no gods exist. No, I have discovered that gods exist. Gods exist, but from God exists to no God exists. My journey there was, I just directly discovered that there is no God. How? I did the proper work that my gurus and my lamas have asked me to do. I meditated deeply. I did all the yogas. I did all the kriyas. I did all of the pujas, all the mantras, and used my sat tarka. I went in so deep with my own mind till my own mind recognized my own nature of mind and recognized that there is no God. There's nothing but absolute complete openness and spaciousness. And no matter what you try to say about it, you can't really in the end. And what you try to find it, you can't. Describe it, you can sort of describe it. If someone knows that experience, they can talk about it and you'll know they understand it. If someone hasn't had that experience, they can talk about it all the time and you know they don't know what they're talking about. I see this a lot in modern teachers who have like philosophy training or Sanskrit training, and all of a sudden they want to start teaching Tantra. Even posing as, well, I'm just going to take you along Tantra. I'm not really a guru or anything, but let me just take you along and show it to you. Well, why would you do that in the first place if you don't know your own nature? That's misleading. But the second point is when they start to talk, they're always caught up in their own confusion because they're not baked. In India, we would say you're not baked. The clay vessel sounds like this when you hit it with a stick when it's baked. Dong, dong, dong. When it's not baked, it goes dud, dud, dud. So in India, they developed this old sense as, is this person baked or non-baked? This is what's always used as a reference point in Mahasiddha tradition, in Mahasiddha communities. Oh, that one's not baked. Oh, that one's baked, right? Being baked is definitely founded upon knowing that there's no God, there's no soul, and that's really crucial to the whole thing. So my experience of it was thinking there was a God, journeying into it with many different traditions to try to get a relationship with that God, thinking I had a relationship with that God, thinking when I got into high tantra that I'm having a relationship with that God and all these gods and goddesses are emanating from that God. And then finally trying to go beyond those emanations of the gods and goddesses to that God and find that I'm going nowhere. There's nothing there. And then discussing that with my gurus, my Indian gurus, and later with my lamas, and they would be like, of course there's nothing there because there is no God. This is just a child's tale that we tell to make people comfortable. And also because intellectually it takes, a bit of work to comprehend that. And people don't really want to do that. And not to mention, like you said, Akita, it puts people in direct confrontation to the idea of the self. And people don't want to let go of a self. And that's tied into a God. It makes them scared. So that's my journey. And as I journeyed into those higher reaches, my teachers unpacked for me new systems of understanding, new systems of practice, new systems of transmission, oral transmission, text transmission too, not just oral. And I started to realize, oh, this is what the advanced training is, right? So until we go through this deep shunya experience that purifies and cleanses us of all notions of a self, an abiding self, all notions of a God, all notions of a non-duality that's a one soup that we're all going to go back into, we're all weak and vulnerable because everything we're doing is building another spiritual version of our own ego structure, another spiritual self-image, another ahankara. It just looks pretty spiritual. And I realized there are steps and stages to this. This is why people say to me, why don't you teach Dzogchen right away? Why don't we do Dzogchen right away? And I said, no, I will never break the rule that Dzogchen is taught at the end of the path of all the other conceptual forms. And when they fall away, then we can teach Dzogchen. because teaching it ahead of time, which I believe is the problem today with the Shaiva scholars who are teaching, they're teaching, first of all, stuff they haven't received and gone through themselves. That's bad enough. That I think they barely comprehend. But then they're teaching the most advanced work, Shambhavopaya Anupaya from the Kashmir Shaivist tradition. They're teaching it to everybody through books, through paid for lectures online, through retreats that people haven't gone through qualified steps for. It's like, whoa, that is creating mass delusion. That's like a new diagnosis in the world today of psychology. Mass delusion, spiritually based, derived from receiving dissociated teachings about a oneness that's beyond everything that I can't even comprehend yet. And then trying to practice and being given to me by teachers who have never experienced it themselves. Boing. Whoa, that's trouble, right? And that's what we're not doing in Trikamasiddha Yoga. The advanced Taoism I'm teaching will always wait for the advanced. The advanced Shaivism that has no God, the original Shaivism has no God. Shiva was a human being, a yogin who taught the Mahasiddha path. He's the first of the Mahasiddhas listed in Hatha Yoga Pradipika. He's not God, right? He's the first guru, Adi Guru. All these systems that I teach, all of them, the Dzogchen as well, like this, they're only going to come at the later stages. I'm only going to teach them in the later stages when a person is prepared for them by completely exhausting the grasping for an individual self. Yep. I'm going to keep clear to that one. Okay. So then, let me close these crazy pop-ups so I can see your stuff. Let's move on then. That probably took like an hour, right? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we'll be here for 3 days answering these. I can't give a short answer. It's very hard because these questions are great and they deserve full answers. But in this flow of questions for today and maybe the next session, many of them are building on each other. And we tried to arrange them that way. So we're going to be able to refer back to the earlier question for this idea and then keep moving. Now, on morning routine. Okay. I didn't see this part of your question too. Sorry. On morning routine, what is a good morning routine? Take the Primal Ayurveda course. We have a good morning routine there. Should I meditate immediately upon waking up or should I do body movement before meditation? Okay. Real simple on this and what kind of movement is best. If you are a person who's practicing the higher levels of practice, the advanced stages of non-dual meditation, then it's better to wake up, quickly make your ablutions in the bathroom, have a sip of water after you clean your mouth out, just a sip of water or a sip of light green tea. Do like 1 minute of forward stretching, relax, stretch your mouth, yawn a bit, and then sit down and meditate. And afterwards, practice your what we call conscious embodiment. Whatever kind of conscious embodiment you do, Qigong, yoga, sacred dance, doesn't matter. Martial arts, Kung Fu, weaponry, doesn't matter. But I would do that after. Now, that's for the person who's seeking total realization beyond form practice of meditation. Then the body conscious embodiment takes the form of expressing the enlightenment that you're experiencing from stage 7 up. That's how we usually practice. And then we experience the expression of that through the conscious embodiment. It's reversed for practitioners before stage 7. You do the conscious embodiment first to get the channels, the chakras, the dosha dhatu, everything as harmonized as possible, to not interfere with the mind channels so much, to slow it down, to calm it down, to take down the inner winds, like that paper I wrote before, part 1, part 2 coming, reducing the inner winds, right? And then you can sit down and then you can meditate, and it's so much easier. And you enter nice and smooth like this. And then eventually you're sitting long enough and all the channels start getting busy again and clogging up, and you know it's time to finish your meditation. So these are the two approaches, right? Conscious embodiment first when you're going for conceptual realization before stage 7 to smooth everything out so you can sit for meditation. The other approach, if you're after stage 7. Okay. What is it? What kind of movement is best? Whatever. It's hard to say. I practice different kinds of Qigong. I do. Different kinds of Neigong, Jindan, different kinds of yoga, Tibetan yoga, Indian yoga. I never do just postural yoga like Ashtanga, Iyengar, flow, all that, because I'm an athlete. I don't need to do that for a workout. That's not spiritual at all. And I think it's pretty counterproductive to your spirituality, to be honest, to do those practices and think they're spiritual. So the yoga I do is definitely traditional, and we teach that. So if you want to learn that, you can come to learn with us. Level 1 will be out when the website comes out real soon. for free for everybody to get for free, level 1. So I practice that. I weightlift. That comes up in a thing here, uh, in a question later. I do certain kind of weightlifting, body movement, exercise stuff, hit training, all this kind of stuff, basically, to stay fit. So you can do whatever you want. But as far as conscious embodiment, I think you have basically a few categories: yoga, qigong from China, um, certain kinds of sacred dance. Not everything falls into that. I wouldn't really recommend like Shiva rays. What's it called? Uh, I forget what it's called. Do you remember? It's all about just putting on soft rave music and just writhing around and calling it something connected to yoga. It's not systematic. It's not developmental. It's a nice time. It's a good party, but it's not going to do it. So there are systems of conscious embodiment that came out of spiritual systems. Those are the ones I recommend. If you're doing Tibetan Buddhism or Dzogchen, use Tibetan yoga. If you're doing Indian practices, then do the Indian yoga. But to tell you something interesting, this gentleman you see right behind me, Mike Lama, who passed away recently, he had me teaching our system of Shaktashaiva yoga, spiritual oriented yoga, in his monastery. He had me teaching that there, as well as while I was simultaneously learning his Tibetan Dzogchen yoga. Fascinating, because he thought it really had something to offer, that it was pretty fantastic to get someone really deeply embodying their light body through sensations and blah, 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 blah. So, they all work for each other too, let's just say. Okay. All right. Great. Thanks for those great questions to kick it all off, Akita. Now from New York, we'll go to South America. Okay, Jorge. I hope I'm saying your name right, Jorge. I never know quite how to. My Spanish is bad. I'd like it to be better. Number one, is there one or more living Mahasiddha nowadays? Where and who is it? I think this is a great question. I get this question a lot. Where are these Mahasiddhas? I don't believe in them. Are there any? I know you're not saying that, but where are they? Okay. First of all, yes, there are definitely Mahasiddhas alive today. Number one. Number two, I have had direct experience, interaction with them. Some of them. Number three, there's a lot. Number three, where are they? Where are they nowadays? Okay, they're not from history. And here's the beauty of our system. This is the beauty of the path of Trikamasiddha Yoga. Everybody who gets to stage 10, 11, and 12 is a Mahasiddha. So every rainbow light body that you see me post photos of when a person hits that rainbow light level, whether there's 4 levels of rainbow light body, right? A question coming up later about this, a Taoist version or Chan version of it. There's 4 levels of it. When anybody hits level 1, 2, 3, or 4 of it, and we find out about it, we have photos of them before meditating into it, or photos of their funeral with all the rainbows coming out, the burning of the body or whatever that's left over. Or when they just put the body into a stupa and all the rainbows are coming out. I always publish those photos and so on. All of those beings are Mahasiddhas. And you are in a Mahasiddha path. As long as you're practicing Shaivish yoga and you keep digging down deeper and deeper, like we do in Trikamasiddha yoga, and don't settle for a religious form of it, saying God is there, it's all one non-dual soup, just Hare Krishna, Jai Shiva, and I'm all good. As long as you keep going really deep into yourself and really finding the truth, you're going to end up being a Mahasiddha yourself. So Mahasiddhas are everywhere. And once we're past stage 7, it's assured that we're going to reach stage 10, be a Mahasiddha ourselves in a future life here or in another dimension. That's why it's so crucial that we work so hard to expunge self-grasping and get to stage 7 before we die. And that's why we practice health cultivation of Prana Ayurveda, to extend our life, to help with that process, because the more time, the better. It's just not acceptable to let ourselves go into obesity, inflexibility on purpose or through neglect. You got some kind of genetic disease, or you have something happen when you were young, you get influenza that comes around, you can't help it. That's different. But we should be cultivating our health consciously to extend so we can reach stage 7 at least and have the foundation set to be a Mahasiddha, because then we can benefit all beings. So yes, Mahasiddhas are around, and they're around with all the light body beings that we hear about. And they're also around with all the beings that light body that we never hear about, because usually you go out by themselves and do it in the woods. And there are Mahasiddhas just in normal life too, it seems. Or let's say they can take the form of a normal person and appear to us and teach us at times. So yeah, they're here. The community is alive, and you're it. Tag, you're it. You're the Mahasiddha waiting to happen. So let's go. Let's get it on. Get to stage 7 and enjoy it. So it's a blissful path, a beautiful celebratory path. People make it into this hard, austere. All that whining, bitching, moaning, and complaining comes from people that want to cling to a self. That's it. That's in a nutshell. Anyone you read about or hear about teachings by these scholars, I even heard Mr. Wallace saying this. Oh, he told me, oh, Dharma, you have such a strenuous approach to spirituality. Right? This was written publicly, so I'm not talking behind anyone's back. Your approach is wrong. It's too strenuous. Realizing your true nature is so easy. Well, there's a lot of people who say that today, many, many teachers. You know why? It puts bums on seats. It fills the coffers. It's easy. Who wouldn't want something easy? Everybody wants something for nothing. That's the number one problem with children today. They want something for nothing. They want a gold medal for coming in last in the race. They want the approval of the teacher for getting everything wrong in math class. And if you don't, you'll get sued because it was a microaggression to discipline the child or to teach them math properly. God, give us a break, you know? We've got to have some ability to be real. Keep it real, folks. I am a New Yorker. After all, we got to keep it real because this is kind of ridiculous, right? So anyway, the path may not be easy, but like anything you love, you'll put the energy and you'll love it, even if it's difficult. I love this path. I love everything that I do with it. And some of it's easy now, and some of it takes effort, but I don't care. I give it the effort. We can't be so afraid of effort, okay? Right. Number 2, if question number 1 is a no, there are Mahasiddhas there are, so we'll skip that. Number 3, can some Qigong practices or similar slow felt energy movements help to recharge vitality into the energy body and be practiced before or after the foundation practice? You know, Jorge, you can do any practices of conscious embodiment that wake up your inner prana or life force all the way through this whole system. You know, Swami Shivananda can be seen jogging around his tucket in his 70s, doing his salute to the sun. There's videos of him doing this, and he's so rich with ojas, and yet he's getting close to death, right? Great yogins who do retreat and rainbow light body, they're often practicing their yoga right up to death, right? But not with the idea of ambition, not with the idea of getting a butt or abs for the summer or being flexible or taking selfies of themselves in a yoga posture and putting it on the front page of their Facebook. I don't get it. Maybe because the Hindu thing is so big on having a self. I don't know, an Atman, but we don't have a self. So why take a photo of it and put it on your Facebook? You yourself sitting there smiling on Facebook, that's fine. But really a yoga posture? I don't know. I don't get it. That's really kind of an anathema to yoga. So Qigong, sure, go for it. Any slow felt energy movement thing, sure, go for it. I always recommend things that came out of our systems because they grew out of our systems, which means they reflect back into our system and help us develop. That's why I always recommend our Kundalini Hatha Yoga that we teach in TMY. I always recommend deep forms of Qigong I learned from my masters, which I'll also teach. And that is foundational. You don't have to wait till later high level Wu Wei Taoist teachings for that one from me. I mean, I'm going to decide soon whether I'm going to just hold a retreat on some Chinese practices that work really well with our system as part of our system, or put them out on the website as videos. I don't like conscious embodiment stuff on video too much. That's why I'm doing only level 1 of Trikomasita Yoga to give people taste so they can get in person and learn, because some problems can happen when you learn physical stuff on videos. So yeah, go for it. Recharge your body. Do all those kind of practices you can. They're all great, right? If they came out of traditional systems, I mean, I wouldn't go with stuff people make up. Certainly wouldn't learn stuff like that from teachers that never practiced it themselves either or perfected it. Number 4 from Jorge, when doing the foundations, I visualize my heart teacher during the practices of Guru Yoga and Mandala being Swami Niranjan. And he was the only Paramahamsa I knew so far. And up to there, the head yogin of my studies. But from this course, from TMY, I see that it may be better to choose a heart teacher after stage 4 or 5, which I'm pretty sure I'm not there yet. So I came back to visualizing Shambhunatha. Can you please guide me in whether this is a helpful change to do in the practice or not? Okay. So the general rule is yes, we shouldn't really choose a heart teacher, even though we can have inklings of it and feel it from stage 2 to 3 to 4. We really shouldn't choose it until we're in high stage 4 or low stage 5. And we're like, okay, this is my heart teacher. And then we can use a visualization of the heart teacher. Before that, we should use Shambhunatha, or if you're into the Dzogchen side of things, Shenla Odkar, as your heart teacher, as the heart teacher. Why? Because they represent the energy that you're going to meet through your heart teacher. Shambhunatha, the white form of Shiva, crystal white Shiva, he represents this pure capacity for equanimity, for love, for compassion, for generosity, for clear view, clear seeing, clear self-reflection. He represents all that, especially equanimity. So in the beginning, we want to invoke that in the place of the guru while we're praying to receive our heart teacher, right? Okay. Now, for you, Jorge, in this case, what if it turns out Swami Niranjan is your heart teacher? Then you had it right from the beginning, right? But for so many people, they may not know whether that person is their heart teacher yet or not. And I've seen people change heart teachers, change root gurus or sat gurus like they change their underwear. So, and often it's really great that one teacher gets us into the work. And then I often know that I'm babysitting, I like to call it, but not to be pejorative, punitive to the person I'm talking about. I'm kind of babysitting a student until their heart teacher shows up. That's often, I can feel it. I don't feel the connection. They're sincere, they're sweet, they're wonderful. Many of you on Trikamasiddha Yoga, I can see your names here. I helped you connect to your other person who you found as your heart teacher right here. I see it. Because we have to be with the one that we really feel in our heart and not our emotional heart. I'm talking about our blue bindu heart. That takes a while for us to be able to get all the thoughts, all the emotions out of the way, all the I want, I need out of the way to discover the already innate connection to our heart teacher. So you can play it any way you want, Jorge. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Of course, it's your life. You can't go wrong having Shambhunatha there, because if it is Swami Niranjan, he's covered, and you'll know that later. But if it isn't, then you'll be more flexible and more open to realizing who it is when that person shows up, and maybe less conflicted. You can choose. Hopefully that's a good answer, I hope. I have read about, number 5, I've read about inner heat yoga and Yabyum practice. Yabyum practice means male-female deities in sexual union in Tibetan systems. But they have it, of course, in Indian as well. I have read about inner heat yoga, Mahakumbhaka, and Yabyum practice. But have in mind, it is always good to go step by step. Exactly. Which things or signs must be there so one can engage safely on these practices? Which preliminary should one point to as to walk towards that direction? Jorge, that's why we have this system. And everybody else who's asking me questions piecemeal, can I receive this? When do I do that? Please, I urge you, we will take you there. No problem. Go through the preliminary practices, preliminary program. Then go through the foundation program. Then pick one of the 5 ways or more than one of the 5 ways that you want to proceed through. And in each one of those 5 ways, you will receive every practice, every initiation, every empowerment, every explanation. And if you ask my students, more than you ever wanted, because I make sure you're super duper clear on everything with lots of teaching, and that you'll ever need. And you'll go right through the practice, right through the path to the realization of your nature and rainbow body, hopefully. So when it comes to inner heat and Yabyum practice, okay, in the progression, let's pick way of fire, Kundalini Hatha Yoga. In that progression, it goes like this. It goes dosha, dhatu, organ, right? Dosha, dhatu, organ, prana, nadi, chakra, bindu. These are the steps, gross steps. Now within that, we could divide it up, and there's about 40 different steps we have to take total to follow the whole path of Kundalini Hatha Yoga. Now, in that path, we must move through certain steps, and they have their signs, and they have their experiences, and they have their initiations that you have to receive as well. So you'll get the practice, receive the initiation, learn about it here, and then go home and practice, or stick around here and practice. And then we'll look at the signs that come or don't come. That's how I used to do it with my teacher. Back then, there was no email. We'd write letters, and I'd send a letter and it'd come back. So I'd go see him for a month or 2, then I'd go back and practice, and letters would go back and forth, right? So the inner heat, so right, in the way of fire, inner heat is learned in level 3. And the conclusion of it is in level 4. Now, when inner heat gets going, that's also when you learn the powerful deity yogas that open up the central channel where you can really become a deity. See, just doing some mantra when you have no inner heat practice, when you have no real deep realization, just doing these mantras and visualizing, really hard to become the deity's body. But when you awaken the capacity for that energy body, non-dual energy body within you, through the yogas first, then you receive the abhishekams like we do in Way of Fire and yoga. And then you become that deity that represents that stage of realization. This is much better. This is more realistic. Yeah. So that's the way I would say, everything is in there. And this is where you would receive it. You would receive the Mahakumbhaka training in level 3. That's the heat yoga you're talking about. And then you would perfect it in level 4, along with the practices of the deities and sexual union, as well as receiving the ancillary practices, right? Which there are many. Now, this also goes back to the path as well. You pick one of the 5 ways, but there are also cycles of teaching that sit outside, independent cycles of teaching from the 5 ways that are really important for us to get in a lifetime. I recommend everybody receives Dream, Sleep, Death Yoga Retreat 3 times, those teachings 3 times in one life, minimum. First time you get it, do it again about 1 year later, 1.5 years later, 2 years max. Then do it again about 3 years after that. Each time a new wave will hit, a new understanding of it, new level of development will be kickstarted. Usually about 3 is enough, but some people, like I've done teachings with teachers on that like 6, 7 times. Same thing with Munchara or POA, transference of consciousness. I've learned over 7 systems because that's how it works, through repetition, right? Okay. Inner heat yoga step by step. Okay. Now, also, you can see it from the other paths as well. There's ways that the equivalent experience is achieved through the other 5 ways, and they come in their own sequence as well. So let's try to do that. Let's everybody go together. It's awesome. I know you got to make it to retreats, but there's only one of me right now. So we're training teachers. That's going to come out soon as an announcement on YouTube, on the Facebook group. Okay. Now, Sukha Siddhi is asking a really beautiful question, and it's really long, but it's really beautiful. And I'm gonna cover it this time in this Yogi to Yogi. So bear with me and really try to hang with it, especially if you're new to the view. She's been a student for a while now. And I'm gonna talk a little bit, answer a little bit as we go, but also give a more full answer in the end, probably. We'll see. Okay, Sukha from Rio de Janeiro, down in Brazil. Here we go. I'm having a hard time understanding how enlightenment is not that homogeneous milky soup, quote unquote. I often talk about it as a homogeneous milky soup, right? That's a stage of realization where consciousness is in the whiteout, but it's not realization, right, of your ultimate nature. So she says, I'm having a hard time understanding how enlightenment is not that soup, and each of us experience our own version of the base. That's not unusual, especially when we start off in God religions like you did. I think you were Lutheran, and I was Catholic. And then we go to Shaivism, which often sounds theological based, like based on a God, until we get higher teachings. I understand that it is not like we dissolve the Nirmanakaya, the individual, the enlightened individual, into the Sambhogakaya, the base behind it of pure non-dual energy, into the Dharmakaya, pure emptiness beyond that, spaciousness beyond that, and that it is the ultimate realization. So she said, I understand that it is not like we dissolve Nirmanakaya into Sambhogakaya, into Dharmakaya, and that's the ultimate realization. It's not linear. The 3 are actually inseparable, correct, and are an understandable model of the Mahabindu, which is to say all 3 together in Shaivism is called the Mahabindu, which is the reality, correct again. In my mind, it comes a dynamism without time, correct again. Not dynamism as movement from a thing from here to there. That would be Sambhogakaya. Sambhogakaya is kind of outside time too, but can engage in time. So that's not quite right, but you're getting the idea. And what? Okay. And it is not happening in a space like I see here in this room with my eyes. It is without directionality, just open and vast. That's correct too. It's not space as a space element. Space element is one of the 5 elements. That comes from the base. That's why it's difficult if I say space. That's why the Buddhists opted for emptiness. And that's why Shaivists opted for Shiva, but then it became a god. So words are tough, right? Not like there's a reference of an I that is conscious of a spacious awareness that expands spherically in all directions. That would be Dharmakaya. That's close to an idea of Dharmakaya, let's say. There's no directions or spherical or anything in Dharmakaya. But anyway, sometimes I feel a sad black hole in my heart, and agony, anguish, anxiety. And if I travel into that experience, going beyond stories, I can relate to the experience and call it emotion. I get to the pure experience that is not empty and sad. It is that great space. It's not anguish, anxiety. It's a great vibration. Is it that a Navamala is a wave I can surf to get to the Mahabindu experience? A Navamala, for people who don't know, is the Shaivist way of saying the initial separation that we get from the oneness experience of the base that we have in our own. We look back at ourselves and recognize and create separation from our own nature. So she's saying, is it that a Navamala is a wave that I can surf to get to the Mahabindu experience? Yes and no. You can surf it to a point, but then you have to let go because a Navamala is a limitation. Nirmanakaya, Jivatma Shakti, the Nara, the one of the prongs of the three bodies that we have that's always there, like you said, the Nirmanakaya, is not a product of a Navamala, except when it's suffering in samsara, but we can get rid of that. Okay? So it is hard to host because it is a feeling of silent explosion that rewinds and explodes again, but not in this order. It's at the same time, and of antagonistic forces, of all and of nothing, of stillness and vibration, emptiness and overflowing, darkness and shine. And mind gets confused. Yes, the mind gets confused when it tries to contemplate the ultimate nature that you're trying to poetically describe. Exactly. That's why I love poetry. That's why I write poetry for the students, right? And not my brain. So, and mind gets confused. And not my brain, head, or thoughts. It is more in the chest, heart. And I sometimes feel some super strong beats, like knocking my sternum from inside out. Sometimes they disappear. So we're talking about a manifestation of this inner experience, right? And I'm learning to not freak out and think I'm going to die. In a way, even though the heart won't beat for a while and oxygenated blood is not being pumped, I know there is energy, prana, vitality, awareness keeping me safe and alive. It also feels like I'm not breathing air. The whole chest, heart, lung area becomes that experience of still explosion. Is it an incongruity between heart bindu, heart chakra levels of awareness? Actually, that's hitting it on the head. I've described that to you with my own experience of fibrillation and palpitations that were all messed up, arrhythmias that I had really strongly when I was 17, and I was put on heart monitors for a long time. Then it came up again later in my Saturn return, first Saturn return, and I was having all the same experiences again, passing out actually, and all that. And it was really a misalignment between the heart bindu, the blue bindu, and the heart chakra. And heart gets all this, extra energy there and disturbed and confused prana. And then the electric conduction of the signals won't work right. And you get different rhythms or it stops. So it's the same thing. This doesn't have to happen to everybody in the path. This is just sometimes what happens to some people, right? But yes, it does represent a sort of incongruity between the heart bindu and the heart chakra level of awareness. Also, skin can get numb, vibrating. Man, I've had so many experiences through my life of ants crawling all over my body, and I run around scratching them for 3 days. It makes you crazy. There's so many weird experiences you can have in the spiritual path. A lot of them don't mean anything. That's why they're not worth talking about. The ones that mean something we talk about as signs along the way. This is another thing I get a lot of questions about. What about these experiences I'm having? Are they signs? Well, if you follow the path clearly, learn the view, you'll know what to pay attention to and what not to. If you don't have that, it's all really confusing. Okay. Also, skin can get non-vibrating, super there, she's saying, like it's really there. You're really aware of your skin, but porous as well. And a tension line, meridian, or shock that connects the center of the sternum to the tongue and lower front teeth. So you're experiencing all these energetic connections within your body that pre-exist, but you're waking up awareness of them. Quite normal. It's okay. Don't focus on them. So there is a me that exists and is aware of this experience. I have an awareness that that experience is the awareness, the sentientness, the Mahabindu three together. Sort of. You can't really say that your experience of it is really the same as the Mahabindu three together or even Sambhogakaya until you fully recognize your nature. And even then, you have stages 8, 7, full traversing of 7, which is years alone, decades maybe, lifetimes. 7, 8, and 9 are where all the energies are fully realized. It takes a long time. So we can't equate these small experiences with the Mahabindu, but we can say it is based in that. It's never separate from it. So when we say that Nirmanakaya as a sense of So when we say that Nirmanakaya as a sense of individual does not happen after Sambhogakaya, which also does not happen after Dharmakaya, it is a component of Mahabindu. It means that there is a referential awareness within that Mahabindu. Yeah, that's Nirmanakaya. But like I said, for the Nirmanakaya to have full cognition of the Sambhogakaya and Dharmakaya, that's like a stage 10 reality. That's really high. Conceptually, we can get it at 7, and we do when we get shunya. But the full thing where you can say that they're co-equal in your own experience, that's much higher. So my body, personality, my history will dissolve as the 5 lights of creation if I rainbow body. True. Or in stage 10, 12 process. Same thing. True. And then there will be still Nirmanakaya as a sense of individual awareness that is completely identified with that black hole and cosmic explosion at once experience, of reality Mahabindu, but still is an individual awareness. Yes and no, right? Yes and no. It is individual, but it's not thinking that it's individual as far as having any sense of other than spontaneously arising as individual. That's very different than how we are now. And it spontaneously arises as individual only in response to secondary karmic causes, beings who are suffering. That's what causes then the Nirmanakaya to come into manifestation by a Buddha. Why do deities that are spontaneous arising awareness beings of pure enlightenment even become manifested? We say birth, but they're not birthed out of anybody's womb or from sexual excitement. They're just manifested. They're just birthed into reality due to the pure experience of the Buddha of this cosmos, experiencing the suffering of the beings within this cosmos the same way that Buddha used to be. This is even why we revere our teachers so much, not deify, but revere, respect, and try to support them as much as we can, because at a certain point in this interesting history, which you're laying out here, yes, time sort of does change. And it sort of does change for the teacher person who's very pure of heart, working very deeply, wanting the best for all beings, wanting to keep evolving themselves on the path. And they become a birthed emanation of the Buddha of that cosmos as well. And that's recognized. And you're like, wow, they really love everybody. Wow, they really want to serve everybody. Wow, I really want to help them. And your heart opens in that love as well. In the resonance of that love, it opens as well. That's Guru Yoga. And then you become a realized Buddha. That's the fruition of Guru Yoga, right? This is very beautiful. So in that way, we recognize that a realized teacher, then, we try to see them, even though they're still not perfect until they're stage 10. Not perfect conduct, can still make mistakes, but not big hurting people mistakes. But we still try to see them as a realized Nirmanakaya Buddha, because that will bring that out in us. And that's actually closer to the truth of who they are than anything we could think about them as biography or what we know when we have pizza with them. Right? But still not deified, not a god, not separate, not other than you. You are a human being, they're a human being. Same potentiality, same path. Always remember that. That's important, okay? That's really important. So let's read that one line again. It's a good question. I hope everybody's hanging with this. It's a very good question, or questions. And then there will still be Nirmanakaya as a sense of individual awareness that is completely identified with that ultimate Mahabindu, that Dharmakaya, but still be individual awareness. That's what I just described. Why that individual manifests again. When it's not needed, it simply resorbs back into Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya. Telescopes out when needed again. And that's why we love our teachers, like everybody in the walls behind me. If I will not be this me that I know after rainbow body, with my personality, with my life trajectory, history, as someone in the human realm, what is that nirmanakaya? Is that a soul? That's what everyone's so scared of. That's what Akita asked earlier in this questioning. What am I if I'm not this? And that's our main problem, isn't it? That's why psychology can only take us so far. What am I if I'm not my thoughts? What am I if I'm not my conditioning? So now we get down to the real spiritual nuts and bolts here. It's your conditioning that goes life to life to life to life. That is your soul. That is your soul. That is your conditioning. But at some point, that conditioning that holds that self-concept can unfold on itself, involute, realize its own nature, and explode and open to know itself as the Mahabindu, as the Trikaya. Nirmanakaya, individual, Sambhogakaya, virtue body, Dharmakaya, openness body. Openness beyond any conception body. All three as one. At any moment, that can happen. So our personality at that point, from stage 7 to 10, stays intact but transforms without self-grasping now, being abiding in the base and arising from the base. That personality takes on divine characteristics. I don't mean godlike. I mean characteristics that can awaken us to our reality. And it's so interesting that sometimes the personality changes tremendously. Sometimes it stays the same. You had Mahasiddhas who were hunters before realization, and they were hunters after. Still shot and killed animals and ate them. I know it flips out all the vegans, but that's because veganism, if you hold to it as an ideal, is another limiting concept. I'm not saying you shouldn't be a vegan. I'm saying don't be a vegan. Don't be a veganism, right? Don't hold an ideal. Eat all the veggies you want. Don't eat any animals. Animals are sweet. Don't kill them. Cool. But as soon as you cling to it and form a new self-identity with it, you're lost. You're gone. No realization possible. Done. A meat eater, a grubby, dirty meat eater compared to you can get realized and enlightened because they're not grasping on the self, just like the Mahasiddhas have done. So the ones that were warriors and killed people before were warriors and killed people after. The ones who made arrows before made arrows after. It's a very strange world. But some change personality a lot. But certainly no matter what comes out in that personality, it always benefits beings when someone's a real stage 10 Mahasiddha, right? Or there's a big question. I got to try to find myself again in here. Okay, so that's it. Yeah, it's not a soul. There is no entity, a soul. There is no entity with a continual existence or lifespan. There is nothing eternal. You do not have a soul. You only are an arising of consciousness, and it's your consciousness, and you realize your own nature. This is in the ancient Shaivism too. It's just that modern Shaivists took on this God idea. It was convenient and easy. Maybe they were copying the Christians that they had contact with through the Silk Route. Really, who knows? Because we're starting to think that light body practice might even have come from Gnostic Christians in Greece. Really weird, right? We don't even know. So we don't have a soul. No, we don't. We just have a field of awareness where self-reflection can arise. And that self-reflection can be one that separates us from our essence or one that is knowing our own essence. When that self-reflection knows our own essence, then it's Chaitanyam Atma, first sutra, Shiva Sutra. Then self is all. That's the realization. Not self is literally all, like yourself is the school bus and other people. Everybody has their own individual nature, their own individual experience of themselves as all, okay? But you're not a soul. No one's going to save us. Nope. And if you screw up, you don't always get to realize in the next lifetime. That's why it's so horrible that people teach this now and let people, sit back and just act out in silly ways until they die thinking I'll do it next life. You never know if you get a next life, to be honest. So what we call base is not Dharmakaya, but the Mahabindu. Base, I really mean to be Dharmakaya, but yeah, Mahabindu, it's kind of both, hard to say. You're trying to nail it down and it can't quite be done so easily. It is not only spaciousness, but the 3-in-1 experience. That's definitely the Mahabindu, 3-in-1, the Trikaya, taken all together, right? So that Nirmanakaya is what my awareness, will be when I have an existence that is not in one of the realms. Yeah, your nirmanakaya, liberated from the realms, your awareness will be a nirmanakaya of nirvana, not of samsara, but of nirvana, when you liberate yourself from the realms, but also when you realize your true nature. It's possible to not be acting out in one of the six realms in a big way and still not be fully realized. You can be a human and be a very good human and realize that you're in the human realm completely, but you're still not liberated from it, right? To be liberated from that human realm then doesn't end your physical human realm body or your personality, like I just said, until after stage 10. Then even that individualization goes away. Okay, getting towards the end. It won't be a realm, a personality, a being with a trajectory, definitely not with a physical body that is identified as the holder of an awareness that exists in time and space. Right. But a subset awareness of the great Mahabindu awareness that still has some gravity or sense of individuality, that is not objectified, separate, has some gravity or sense of individuality that is not objectified, separate, and is of the same nature of that great awareness. Yeah, pretty much. And it exists within that pure black hole and cosmic explosion. No, nothing exists within anything. Let's lose all that terminology. There's no container, there's no contained. These are only temporary things we're experiencing. When we talk ultimate, we can't talk about containers. Okay. So we can't say, and it exists within that pure black hole and cosmic explosion that is not a place, in a place, nor happening in a time. You get close to it, but you still say it's happening in there. So no. And what would then be the ingredient that makes it still be a nirmanakaya and not one and homogenic with that great reality? So what would be the ingredient that makes it still individual nirmanakaya, but not one with all blah, 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 the homogenized soup? There is no homogenized soup. That's the ingredient that makes it not one with any homogenized soup. It's that simple. You can't ask it in that way. There is no homogenized soup. Your realization of your Buddha nature is your own. Her realization of her Shiva nature is her own. Her realization of her is own. Everyone has their own realization. The fact that we're all having the same realization about our own nature is non-duality. Non-duality is not we take all human beings, all beings in the universe, put them in a blender, make a soup out of them, and that's the non-dual base behind them all. We all have the same. We're all the same. It's not that. It's not that. Okay. I know it's hard to understand, but of course, the mind can't really understand it until you're in it, right? So there is no one ingredient to be a nirmanakaya and not one that with this great reality, because there is no great reality. There's no soup. So you just recognize your own nature. It's that simple, actually. That's what makes it so hard as well, because it's really so simple in the end. What is the membrane that makes it still be nirmanakaya? There is no membrane. It's completely contiguous. There is no separation. That is our delusion. Our nirmanakaya, sambhogakaya, dharmakaya are one, inseparable, never able to be experienced separately. Only our brain and our thinking mind, our mind function can analyze them separately so as to enhance our experience of them, so as to enhance our ability to connect to these aspects of our three bodies. But they can never be separated, really, never, right? In a sense. There's no membrane. That's the Anavamala, the membrane. That doesn't exist. But we certainly act like it does, you see. That's not unusual. We act like many things exist that don't really exist. We have dead set racists who think that certain races are lesser than them that really exist. That doesn't exist. We have all kinds of people that cling to all kinds of illusions. Are there stage 13 or 14? No. Meaning, what are we becoming after stage 12 dissolution? No. There's not a process in time space. So therefore, of course, that can't be 13, 14, right? That's what 7 through 12 shows you completely. Time space is something that arises as a dreamlike experience in all its various forms, all the various spaces, all the various times, infinite, within that openness, right? But not contained and not a new level. Is it that there is still dissolution that keeps going? There's dissolution and creation constantly, but that's not the ultimate. That sense of gravity keeps becoming weaker until there's not a nirmanakaya. No, what takes away a nirmanakaya is not fusion with Shiva. What resorbs the nirmanakaya is the lack of need for a nirmanakaya anymore, the lack of suffering beings, of suffering sentient beings in the universe. And someone asks a little bit later, a few pages down the line, what is a sentient being? We'll get into that. So that helps understand that. Second question you had is a lot shorter, so we'll cover it real quick. So I am this woman that is working, raising my child, driving around, shopping, cooking, cleaning, relating. I'm running around a schedule, and my chakras are projecting my reality. Correct. Rather, the chakras are projecting your karmas, which project your reality, right? I made an effort to stop and write this question. I guess you were driving or something, because these experiences are in the back of my mind, but I have no time to digest it. Should I forget this matter and just keep doing normal life? Or is there a way to keep some kind of second attention or sadhana that helps integrate a vast awareness as I'm going through life? Of course, second attention. What I do many times is inspiratory or expiratory apnea, and I go past the point of passing out and host the experience. Watch the heart, lungs, vibration, space, etc. Do its own crazy thing as I'm sticking needles in patients or washing dishes or pooping, etc. Not when talking. I stopped doing it driving because it could go wrong. If you think. I'm not sure that, yeah, you're right. I'm not sure that you should be doing stuff that makes you pass out, that affects your heart and lungs like that, just to try to have a second attention on what's real. Why don't you be soft with the second attention and always have a sense that you're aware of what's happening? Are you really just that simple? Are you really aware of what's happening? That's why Zen training, walking, eating, talking. They do that for years in the beginning of Zen training because nobody's aware of what they're doing. Nobody's home. Just try that. Be softer about it. There's a crazy thought in my mind that tells me there's no problem, but if I think of my child, I don't want to take the risk, and it makes me be more cautious. That's a good motivation. Our children are a great motivation for us, but you have to be soft about it. And that's it. I watch it, but I wonder if there's something else. No, you're doing great. No problem. Okay. Next question from Padma. Hello, Padma. Padma in Arizona, biker chick, extraordinaire. Here we go. Can you talk about intensity, frequency, and duration as it relates to karma? Good grounded question. Back to the grounded stuff. Every karma is a conditioning. Let us let go of the big deal that Shaivism and Buddhism make out of defining what is a pratyaya, what is a vasana, what is a karma, what is a samskara. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to have these subtle distinctions. Maybe it's nice to talk about it when you talk about high philosophy, so you know exactly what kind of karma you're talking about. But does it get you liberated? Not really. Not really. If you follow the path through the practices, you don't need this information. And if you do need it, it'll be there in your own experience. So I know what the experience of these levels are, but why define them? Just keep working through them and get rid of them. It's like this. It's like saying both of these things are really hot. This one is 1,000 degrees. This one's 800. I can tell the difference. Bloody hell, throw them both down. They're burning you, you fool. Why do you got to know which one is hotter than the other by 200 degrees? They're both burning your bloody hands. Throw them down. So here's the thing. You don't need to know about it. All you need to know is all the things I just named that are karmas are nothing but conditioning, right? Karma is nothing but conditioning. We have many layers of ourself that can be conditioned. There are people that write to me to talk about their spiritual experiences and sure that they're having the enlightenment experience, sitting there and everything is pure white, infinite pure white in all directions. That's still conditioning. That's a state of consciousness. That's not the enlightened state of your Dharmakaya. That's a state of consciousness, right? It's a conditioning. So intensity, frequency, and duration relates to karma in that these three factors are what create the strength of you adhering to those karmas. I'm going to say, along with a very important thing, super important. So everybody pay attention to this one right now. If you got spaced out on that long question before, listen. The frequency, intensity, and duration of the karma is important. But the deeper you abide with your own essence nature, the more you're not conditioned. Susie Darren lives down here at the center, next to the center now in a house. And we're working on the books for Trika Psychology. And we were discussing how, what are the mechanisms that cause some people to not be traumatized by sexual abuse or PTSD from the Iraq war or whatever? And what causes others to get traumatized by that? Some people are more susceptible to conditioning. That susceptibility is directly based upon what level of Shaktipata they have experienced in their life If you know what that word means, it means it's directly based upon what level of their own svasvarupa, rigpa, their own nature, their own individual nature of essence that they've recognized so far. It's progressive. Some people say it's all at once, so yeah, whatever. But it's progressive. As you get more progressive hits of it, you're said to have greater shaktipatas. As you have greater shaktipatas, you get more wisdom. And things can't cling. You don't cling to things. You don't create a self-identity, and they can't cling to you. So you can have a person who's in a war, watching horrific things, doing horrific things, and not be conditioned by those things if they're at a high state of realization of their nature. You could have somebody like Yeshit Zogil, who was raped 2 or 3 times. You guys remember from the book? Her story about it, going to find Padmasambhava. She was raped 2 or 3 times out in Central Asia. She searched for her teacher, her guru. She heard about this great master, wanted to go be with him. It was not easy for a woman to travel around in those days. It's not that easy now, still in some crazy misogynistic countries in the world. But then it was really dangerous. And she went through these rapes, and she had already established a very good, like stage 5, 6, 7 kind of experience. So she was trying to instruct them during the rape. Amazing. She was trying to liberate them during the rape. She couldn't defend it because she was too weak. But I mean, weak compared to them, right? Numbers and all. But she was so with it and so not suffering through it that she was actually trying to instruct them. I mean, wow, that's awesome. Do you think she had PTSD? Do you think she was traumatized, wounded? There are people, even some spiritual practitioners I know that are psychologists or psychiatrists that I've had discussions with, world authorities, written books and give testimony in The Hague, all kinds of stuff on war crimes and how it affects people. They've said, oh, that's all baloney. She had to be traumatized. She had to be wounded. And that is wrong. Straight up, I'm going to tell you that's wrong. That comes from that person's lack of recognition of their own true nature. In the case I'm talking about specifically, I know because I was on retreat with him underneath our Lama. He didn't realize his nature. So everybody else, of course, was as daft as he was, or as able to be traumatized and conditioned as he was. That's called projection. That's basic psychology. And that's what a psychologist should know, right? So here's the thing, though. It is possible to jump over. It is possible to bypass true wounding. And that may not come up for you until stage 4 or 5, when you really get into the deep energy practices, or if you get into a relationship with a tantric teacher ahead of time, before stage 4 or 5, and you're not ready for the responsibility of seeing these things about yourself. And in the reflective experience of interacting with a tantric teacher, they lambast you verbally, they chide you, tease you. You're their lover this week, then you're not the next week, whatever it is, because all this stuff happens in Crazy Wisdom Tantra stuff. Oh my God, instead of seeing yourself, and seeing all your emotions and seeing your contraction, because you have a deeper realization, instead of seeing it as it is and just going, wow, thank you, Guruji, for showing me all this crap I was holding on to with your crazy methodologies. People freak out and they get wounded and traumatized. But who wounded and traumatized them? Does anybody ever have the power to wound and traumatize us, except for when we're little children and we're out of control? No, we do it to ourselves, because we haven't had enough Shaktipata. We haven't had enough deep relaxation into our own nature, right? So a lot of postmodernists are going to have a hard time with this talk I'm giving right here. It sounds like Jordan Peterson and, all those voices for reality. But I'm a Dharma teacher and a Dharma practitioner. And if anything, it's real. Dharma is real. So yes, people do get traumatized. People do get wounded. And here's the thing, Padma, with frequency, intensity, and duration, if I don't have very much recognition of my nature, and I'm very depleted, my nervous system isn't strong, but my jadatu is not strong, I don't have a lot of prana, right? I can get wounded, traumatized by very little, actually, very little, right? I'm talking about not consensual things, non-consensual, someone attacking you, whatever, of course, or you're being around a situation that's so powerful, it goes in really deep. You see bombs blow up and people's limbs flying off or something, for sure. And that's what's interesting. So yeah, even we can't say this experience of being hit on the head, that's categorized as traumatic. And this experience over here of someone hollering at you, that should be not categorized as traumatic. We can't say that. It's for whom and when. It's how we take it. Then once we understand that factor, I might be traumatized by little or a lot, whatever. Then we look at it and we say, what is the frequency of the experience? Example, I was listening to an Iraqi war veteran say that every day that he went out on patrol, they would have to either explode or unfortunately come into contact with an IED, with improvised explosive device. IEDs are like homemade bombs, right? Every single day. And when they went out in these patrols in these vehicles, the bottoms didn't have enough armor to stop them from getting blown up with this. So these guys thought this could be the last day. This could be the last day. This could be, you don't think that could like do something to your head after 700, 800 days of that in a row? Dude, that's crazy. And you're not fighting to save your homeland. You're fighting so American oil companies can get rich and construction companies can get rich. The vice president's company, right? At the time. So, you don't even feel good about what you're doing. Yes, you're going to get traumatized. You're going to get traumatized. That's frequency. That's frequency. It also, by the way, is intensity because this karma can kill you. This conditioning, this is a bomb. So that's a lot of frequency. That's a lot of intensity. And then the people were there for years. They're messed up if they didn't have really deep sense of who they are in their nature. Now, I was a bartender in 1986 on the beach in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, before I headed off to Australia to find my future. And my bartender captain, who happened to be a captain in the Marine Corps, was a guy named Charlie. And it sounds like a joke, doesn't it? Charlie Company. But he was a phys ed teacher and a bartender. And we got to be good friends and talked a lot. And I was interested in his career as a Marine Corps captain. He had done 3 tours of Vietnam. He volunteered to go back for each tour. And he was in the thick of it, like the hard fighting, the hand-to-hand stuff that's horrible. And I asked him, I said, yeah, but from what I've learned, this is back in 86, I said, it was wrong that we were there, right? And he goes, yeah, it was wrong. And I said, you did horrible things to people that didn't deserve it. He goes, yeah, I did. How do you deal with that? He goes, at the time, I didn't think I was doing it for wrong reasons. At the time, I believed it. I believed what my government had told me. So he was the kind of person that kind of harsh stuff, the intensity of it, the frequency and the duration didn't affect him. And the fact that when he found out that it was all wrong, he said he felt terrible and he felt guilt and shame and he cried it out, but that he processed it out and let go of it just the same as he let go of what he did before when he was a captain in the Marine Corps. This is a person who's strong inside and not insensitive. I found him to be a great guy, not insensitive at all. I just knew what was real and what wasn't real. So frequency, intensity, and duration of karma is a very important thing to understand. And we have to know ourselves and know what we can tolerate. That's important, right? Okay. Hope that's what you were talking about. What is it? At the bottom? Ava, in those crazy wisdom practices you mentioned, this methodology would be more effective if the student understood it clearly. New wounds and conditioning can be created that were not there before. Yeah, no, yes, Ava, but even before that, here's the point. The student before stage 5 should not be into that kind of a crazy wisdom situation. Problem is, some teachers have very high realization at a certain level, and then students want to practice with them, but they don't realize that they're kind of crazy wisdom. And the teacher is not sorting out whether they should or shouldn't do it because they're not in that stage of development anymore where they think about all this stuff. They just know that going through their life and doing what they're doing, whatever comes into their life is part of their life, and then it's going to benefit those beings. Now we can say, oh, but that's kind of bad, Well, sort of, but the people have to take responsibility for it. And that's why I'm telling you, Ava, that when a student is in stage 5, they will take responsibility for that situation. Now, what you're describing is when people are in stage 4, stage 3, stage 2, stage 1, and I agree 100%. And then you just wrote, sometimes it's forced upon without choice. Oh, that's just evil. Non-consensual anything is evil. Even if I laid a student down underneath me on the floor and I screamed at them and hollered at them with my hand like this and went at them for like a half hour and they didn't want to receive that lecture, that lambasting, right? Hollering at them really like a mean person, that's still traumatic. That can create wounding in a 2, 3, 4 person. I am totally with you on this. I get it 100%. Nothing should ever be forced on anybody, ever. That's absolutely wrong. Never, right? What if a crazy wisdom teacher were to write a contract and you read everything really clear, like you said, okay, it's really clear. Now I sign it. Okay, you signed that contract. You know what you're in for. But it doesn't matter. If you're in stage 2, 3, 4, or 1, even worse, you're still going to hate that person. You're still going to think they're attacking you. You're not going to see it as them helping you break through your grasping, your self-grasping, to see clearly your self-grasping and let it go. You're going to react to it and say, oh no, that was mean. Oh no, that was torture. Oh no, that was whatever. So the problem is you have to understand who is the student, what is their capacity, and the student has to take responsibility for themselves. It's a two-way street. So that's why crazy wisdom teaching should be, I think, avoided. I think all students should avoid crazy wisdom teachers who use beatings, who use mental, emotional torture, who use fear-inducing situations, who use sex to grind down the ego and show grasping and to wake up all the romantic attachments and so forth. I don't think it's working anymore. I don't think it works anymore. I don't think it's useful. I've experienced it directly in my life. It's not useful for students anymore. Did it work for me? Yes. Yes, it worked for me, without a doubt. I have nothing against any of my gurus who used all those means with me. And I'm grateful, actually. But I'm the kind of person who doesn't get conditioned easily. I'm a bit street smart, tough. But other people don't have that. And we have to respect that, honor that. And you're right. Non-consensual anything is wrong. That's it, period. Nothing more to say about it. Padma, can I talk about the principles of frequency, intensity, and duration regarding sadhana? Okay. How that creates agama karma. Okay. So thank you for refining it. I love the short question, but thanks now for the refining so I can find out what it really is. The more we practice our sadhana, that's frequency, the more we are reconditioning our limited mind towards the Dharma. This is absolutely crucial. Without reconditioning our mind towards the Dharma, we will never produce dharmic fruit, dharmic conduct, dharmic experience. If you sit down and do a very hard practice for a half hour a day, an hour a day, and then the other 23 hours of the day, you're being run by your normal conditioning, it means 23 hours you're being reconditioned by your normal conditioning. And only 1 hour you're conditioning this way. So that's why I always said in my school, it's better if students do a long session in the morning if they can get it in to start the day right. I do mine in bed before I even get out, before my eyes even open, actually. I do my very first session in bed before my eyes even open for wakefulness, whenever I can catch it, not always successful. But then I close right away and start again. And then I try to hold my second attention all day long on my own self-nature, right? So in this way, we can start to change that dynamic where frequency is not just 1 20, 30-minute or hour or 2-hour session in the morning and the rest of the day we run wild. So we want in our sadhana to have more frequency. The way to do that is have more sessions during the day. So then Sukali and I will strive to catch 2 or 3 more sessions during the day. If we're in retreat mode, we'll get 5 a day. And then the in-between is very, we're not doing movies, we're not doing whatever, retreat is retreat. And then you're really, we're not working, and we sink into second attention, awareness of our own nature to whatever degree we can open into. And that makes really a powerful amount of frequency. And that's also why I recommend regular retreat, because that's a way to get more frequent as well, get more intensity and duration. Now, the intensity is what can you show up with, right? What do you show up with? I was just training my son the other day. We were having a workout and he was dogging it. He was starting to feel lazy. And I was shouting at him, let's go, keep your back straight, sink down, thighs parallel, because he wants to train now. And he's developing a very nice athletic body. And I want to, he wants that effort. And so I'm keeping him clear of how I said, what's wrong with your mind? Why does your mind want to stop right now? What is it telling you? This won't hurt you. It's good for you. Go for it. All the things a coach should say. But he's not being traumatized, right? Because he's wanting it. Now, that kind of intensity should be self-generated, but sometimes we find it hard to be self-generated. But the more we can generate intensity, the better. How do we do that? We can generate intensity with negative and positive ways. The negative way is to think, I'm going to die someday, and I better know what the hell I'm doing. I better be realized, because it's been a shit show so far. Right? I want to get realized. Okay. And I'm going to die. And I know that's a fact. And maybe as you get older, I can see that my conditioning is actually becoming more crusty. So there's a motive, a negative motivating factor, but that's good, negative motivation sometimes. Positive motivation is better if you can get it, and I suggest we train it. So as we get into devotion deeper, we get positive motivation, we get inspiration, aspiration. We start to realize I'm devoted to my own essence nature, not in a narcissistic sense, not in a self-love sense. There's no self-love in any Dharma teaching. Someone asked that in another question here. We'll get to it. There's no such thing as self-love in the Shastra. There's no self-love. So, but there is devotion. There's devotion to this wonderful essence nature of mind that we are, and the responsibility that we know that we have to realize it within this lifetime, be given this gift to realize it before we get recycled at death, and there's a devotion that develops out of that, and a sweetness that develops out of that, and a love and kindness and generosity and forgiveness and all these great virtues that come out of that, and a courage and a strength and a perseverance as well. And I like it mirrored to me in my consort, who's my essence mirror, in my understanding of my Lama, who is also my icon of essence, my guru, my icon of essence, my first guru, and then my Lama, and then who is also my deity that's been assigned to me, that is part of my being. And I feel that devotion there. So I get reflective, devotional inspiration from all these sources. That's intensity. And when you can get that intensity to a high level, you cry tears. It's very hard for me to read the foundation practices and not be emotional. I have to really hold it back and really channel it into higher function, because it's saying the most beautiful things. I love the foundation practice, right? So this is the way. Now, as it relates to Agama karma is the spiritual karma we create from making the choice to act against our normal impulses and do the spiritual thing. Now, this is probably the most intense choice a person can make. And you all know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's the hardest. Let's say I'm the heroin addict. The hardest thing is when someone puts a needle full of it right in front of you to go, nah, I don't want it today. I mean, are you kidding me? It's incredible. We just watched a movie, Razor's Edge, a spiritual movie last night with Bill Murray, a remake, first of the Tyrone Power movie from 46. And Razor's Edge is amazing. And there's a scene in that movie where a woman tempts an alcoholic to drink because she's having a really low day, deep depression. And she takes the drink, right? Of course, we're going to do that. So it takes a tremendous intensity, the most intensity, to say no to our closed symbols, to our treasury of worms, all those ways we describe our deepest karmic impulses, our Rahu patterns. And when we say no to them and we do the other thing, wow, the energy that comes is phenomenal. And if we can make a pattern out of that, you're going to get liberated no matter what. That's it. So, everybody who's been an addict to anything, because Rahu makes us addicts of everything, no matter where Rahu lands in our spiritual astrology chart, we say no to that and we become something else. We then become the most amazing being if we're following a spiritual system where that energy can then have fruition, transform. So that's how we recreate Agama karma. Every time we choose with Kriya Mana karma, this is in what, foundation course? Or prelims? Karma's in foundation course or prelims? So in the foundation course, we go into detail in the karmas. You can learn all about karma. It's important to understand this, what I'm talking about now. So in the foundation course, you look at Kriyamana karmas when we are confronted with a situation from our own karmic conditioning, and we say, no, I'm going to choose out. I'm going to choose different. I'm going to choose for the Dharma, to benefit beings, to love all beings. That's huge. It's huge to love myself enough, and you choose out and you do something different. And then if you repeat that frequency and you do that for long enough, choose in the moment, duration, long enough, over enough years, you change and you become a realized being. So that creates Agama karma. Every single choice you make in that direction creates more momentum exponentially to go in that direction. Luckily, we don't have to have one karma here, one bad karma here, one good karma here, one limiting condition karma here, one non-limiting condition here. We don't have to go, okay, that's one. Okay, that's two. I mean, that would be exhausting because we have millions of lives and we've acted out like a real bonehead in all of them, pretty much. That's why we're still here. So it's really great that we can hit a certain frequency of vibration and wipe out tons of it in one shot. But we have to stay persistent with it until we're into the higher stages of view, past stage 7. And then it becomes a rock rolling downhill instead of a rock rolling uphill. So first we have to roll that rock uphill. We're going to fail. The rock's going to roll back down. We got to pick it up, keep it going. Eventually get to the top. It balances. Stage 7. Then we just blow on it. It rolls down the other side. 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Not to say there's not effort in there, and it might be strenuous at times, but you're going to love it. Okay, that's how it works with Agama Karma. Jeff. Shri Jeff, I imagine. Shri Jeff Carson, I hope. Hello, Jeff, down there near the race course, Phillips Island, right? All right, dear Dharma. In a post to Sandra von Zabiensky, huh? Okay. In a post to Sandra von Zabiensky yesterday, you spoke of the importance of going through the stage 7 process, for only after shunya and self-recognition have purified our attachments and self-images do we have the true basis for playing with the world as a manifestation of essence. Absolutely, Jeff and everybody, absolutely. And I covered it in the beginning of this class. I'm going to dedicate a solid half hour, 45 or an hour class only to that, and we'll put it up on YouTube. It's that important. It's what's missing today in these philosophical Shiva schools out there right now, especially Neo-Tantra. They're all missing it. They're completely missing it. Yes. If there is sufficient time, could you expand on stage 7 process in more detail, including the view and teaching learning mode? The view and the teaching learning mode. Jeff, send me a quick one if you're on right now about what do you mean by the teaching learning mode of stage 7? I mean, I'm thinking that you're thinking, what is the student's mode of learning in 7? You still study the oral teachings, you still attend the teachings and trainings, you still read the text if you're into text, you still do the practices. It's quite normal, though, to have a little bit of a spiritual fasting occur now and then. That happens at times, meaning when you're in stage 7 and it first hits, a lot of your spiritual ambitions are clarified and purified, and you start to have really a lot of wisdom happening. You go, oh, this was ambitious. This was spiritual materialism, and you start to let all that kind of stuff go, right? Okay, so the view there is that some things may go. You'll definitely have more of an effortless experience, or let's say much less strenuous experience. Even with the practices that you thought were effortful before and difficult, and maybe ones that you didn't, that you shied away from, or you woke up and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do my yoga. It'll be easier. That's a definite experience that'll happen in 7 as a learner, right? Also, you'll be able to recalibrate all the teachings you had before from stages 1 through 6, which is really great. As a learner, every time you go through a new stage, everything you learned before gets recalibrated. But the key stage of all 12 stages is 7. So if you get to 7 and you're abiding in your own nature for the first time in unbroken fashion, everything you were ever taught in spiritual work and every experience you ever had that you interpreted a certain way will be reinterpreted in the most expansive, enlightening way you ever knew before. It could even include in 7. Now, think about this. I'm talking about it in these, off terms, but I don't mean just that. It could be that in 7, you realize you did something wrong that you never took responsibility for. And then you own up to it. And then you make your reparations for it. Without guilt and shame and so forth, but recognizing that before you had rationalized it and you actually made a mistake and you need to really own up to it. So it's not just on high or whatever, but yes, when you realize those things and when you own up to them to whatever degree you can, that also is the expansion of the energy. That also is the moving into ease and effortlessness of stage 7, right? Not just the lovey-lighty part. And your second part of that is the means by which the sadhak is determined to have completed this stage. There is sufficient time. What are the means by which the practitioner is determined to have completed this? How do we measure if someone has completed stage 7? That's a big one, really big. Because what happens is that in the lineages that I come from, it's up to the person to decide. Now that's dangerous, right? But when you're in a system like the Bumpo system of my Lama's monastery, or the ashram system of my guru, and so forth, you're in a system where if you start running around talking like you're stage 7, you pretty quickly realize you're not, because you're just not getting the right feedback. Not that people are just making fun of you. It's that you're hearing yourself. You have some self-awareness. And when you say this stuff, You're not in an environment where everything is validated, like the postmodern craziness we have today, where everything everybody says has to be real and accepted as truth. That's not the spiritual world. Forget about that. That's crazy. But also, there's nobody there saying you're not there. There's no police. There's no sheriff of the Dharma running around and grabbing people saying, no, you got to go back to class 5. You're not in stage 7. You got to go forth back to 3. And yeah, if you cause trouble in a monastery or an ashram, they're going to talk to you about it. How it comes out, how people know what stage you're in is when they approach the Guru or Lama and they say, I want to teach. Or they approach the Guru or Lama saying, I'm really having a hard time with this practice. It's not giving the fruit. Why? And the Guru or Lama says, because you haven't applied the principle of shunya. You're still self-grasping. You're trying to get something from this practice. You're doing too much strenuous effort, whatever it is. This is how it really comes out, right? But are there real characteristics of stage 7 that make it understandable to us rather than from an outside assessment? Of course. And they're laid out in the foundations practice as we go through stage 7. And when people, let me make a little shout out to our training called Foundations of Trika Mahasiddha Yoga. The reason we offer that, even though it's offered online, why is it offered here at the retreat center too, is because I go into the 12-stage view in much more depth. And I go into it as a dialogue with the whole student body who's at the retreat. So you get to really feel your way into each stage and your experience of each stage, which just can't be done through generic teaching. And from that, I often give inner teachings and secret teachings as well. Every teaching has outer, inner, secret, and most profound levels. So even when we're in a foundations training, sometimes we'll dabble a little bit in secret teaching of the 12-stage view. But definitely we go into inner teaching, which I can't do in public on an online training, right? There's already people who stole this system without ever having learned it all or been authorized. I can't wait for the first book to come out. I know it's going to come out, but there's teachers out there who don't have gurus, who never did practice, but see themselves as tantric masters, and they're teaching it. So I don't give the inner secret and most profound level out loud like this. And I'm quickly writing the book to secure it for our lineage, to make sure that it's preserved in its integrity, so that people, if they do reach this tradition, they're not deluded by the teachings given by someone who has a false realization, false understanding of those teachings, because they didn't go through the process of asking their teacher questions about each stage and getting refinement and the practices for each and so on. Okay. So it is determined this way. This is how it's determined. Okay. And it's best to just be humble. I mean, let's just be humble. But basically, one of the ways you can see it is actually in the movie last night. It's wonderful to see it in Razor's Edge. I think this is one of the movies I gave to Bobby Chop to put up on Sunday movie list. We didn't do it yet, right? So hopefully she puts it up. If not, Bobby, and you're watching, add Razor's Edge with Bill Murray. There's a moment where his old girlfriend, Bill Murray's old girlfriend in this movie, has his new girlfriend, the ex-alcoholic, get back into alcohol when she's having a bad time, as she's really grieving the loss of her previous husband and child. She was really down low, and Bill Murray's ex-girlfriend, who's married to his best friend at this time, gets her to drink, basically. And from that, she goes back to a terrible way of life that ends up getting her killed, murdered. And Bill Murray is asked to go identify the body by the police, and he does. And he doesn't have a strong emotional attached reaction, but he has a very clear love and grieving for what's going on for this woman, and kisses her gently, tenderly, and holds his face next to her. And then he goes back and talks to his ex-girlfriend to try to help her. He says, you just don't get it, and he talks to her, but he doesn't freak out and try to get revenge and hurt her. And this is one of the ways you see stage 7. It's not bypassing when you love those people that harm you. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is, You don't have to let them harm you. You're allowed to defend yourself if someone attacks you. But you understand the process. And you don't have revenge reaction. You don't have a hateful reaction. You just want to go on with your life and let them do their own thing. And you love them and you wish them the best. This is one way we can see it. It's what was originally meant by Jesus's teaching of turning the other cheek. He didn't mean that everybody should walk all over you. You know, if someone walks up to us out in the street, I'm out with my wife and kids and we're going to dinner and somebody tries to mug us, I mean, obviously we're going to try to get away safely. But if that person literally physically attacks us, I'm not going to let it happen to the best of my ability. Turn the other cheek. No, it didn't mean that. If a foreign country invades your country, you don't have to turn the other cheek. No, you can kill them all, right? That's now dharmic. What Jesus was talking about, what I'm talking about here is one of the signs of 7, though, is that nothing sticks the way it used to. You're not conditioned the way you were before. If you have something go on in your daytime, you were fired that day, maybe you hate the boss, you drink all night, maybe you have dreams about killing the boss for years, all that stuff sticks with frequency, intensity, and duration. You've been conditioned, poisoned. In 7, you're Teflon. In 7, you're spiritual Teflon. You know, it just doesn't stick anymore to you. And beyond that, it's not just a dissociated warriorship. It's a really powerful connection that you have to all of life, because 7 takes away the clinging to conceptual barriers. You may still have them out of habit in stage 7, but it takes away the clinging to them. And when it's shown to you, you drop it, you open, you're not holding. This is really the most important of 7. Most important. You're no longer, here's the second way to look at it. You're no longer actively, consciously, willfully creating a self-image. There is nobody home for that anymore. You do not see the utility. You do not see the utility or the reality of a self-image. You actually see it as a dream, an illusion. So you don't consciously, willfully try to create it anymore. You know what I mean? It's really different. So these are 2 of the main characteristics. Come to Foundations or Mind of Shiva, where we do a lot of stage talk in the dialogues, and you'll see more about that. He's not writing something for, okay. What's the scriptural basis for, what was it again? For stage 7, scriptural basis for the fruit of stage 7, I guess you're asking for, or if you don't know, this 12-stage view was never written down. I'm the first one to do it from our lineage. I don't know how many generations it existed before or not. I just received the teaching and I'm writing it down. So there's no scriptural basis for that. And when I write my book, let's please not call it a scripture. And as far as scriptural basis referring to stage 7, the canon is rife with information on the shunya experience, on the spaciousness, more on the Buddhist and Bumpo side than the Shaiva or the Taoist side. And there's excellent, excellent scriptures that you can read about that. I would suggest reading textbooks about Mahamudra, Prasangika, Mahamudra, and what else could get you there? Yeah, read those texts, and those are really good for sinking you into this understanding of what really is shunya and so on. Okay. Did I miss anything urgent, Kevin? Spiritual Teflon, right on. Yeah, I thought that was funny too. We're 2 hours in, and are you okay? We're still going? Are you okay? Class? Who's here? Okay. All right. I'm going to keep going a bit more. You can run away if you want to. I'm going to try to go a bit more. Oh, what is the lineage? You don't need to say this, but I am more of a Teflon level and mostly just clarification of other people's experiences I've read about with the crazy. I agree with you too. But what do you mean? What is the lineage? Right back with you mean with what that question means. I'll go to Elodie's question. Hello, Elodie. Hello, France. Carlos Castañeda mentioned an assembly point. Now you're getting to the fun stuff. Carlos Castañeda, yeah. I loved reading his books. Fiction. They're all fiction. That's what you need to know, first of all. He's been exposed as a huge fraud. We always had the feeling that he was, because he was mixing teachings from Shaivism and Taoism and shamanism and different parts of Arizona with what really goes on in Mexico and different parts of Mexico, which goes on other places. So anyway, but great books, fun to read. He was a bit strange and made a bit of a cult, but anyway. Carlos Castañeda mentioned an assembly point. I think it was assemblage point, but either way, same thing. On the egg-shaped net of energy thread of the human being, like our aura that was a net of a lot of fine lines and filaments. In his book, it is said that the sorcerers can move this point around. They can change their assemblage point, and by doing this, project another version of reality, like go over to here, and all of a sudden I'm in another world with inorganic beings that are made of water. And you're like, whoa, that kind of thing. I found similarities in Dzogchen. Can you explain it from a yogic standpoint? Okay. What I would really encourage you to do is enjoy his books for what they were and forget about him as relating to anything in our teachings or anything in the other teachings. I know it's going to be hard to do. I had a hard time doing it because I also read them and they influenced me too. There are no assemblage points that we shift in ourself or on ourself or in our aura that make us see the universe in a different way. It's only through shifting our inner reality that we see things in a different way. So I hate to be so boring in my answer for such a fantastical question. I don't know what similarities you found in Dzogchen like that. You might want to let me know because I'm a pretty good student of Dzogchen and I've never seen any shifting of the assemblage points that happens happens in Dzogchen practice. So you might want to write that in. If you're there now, send it in right now and I'll get to it. Okay. So from a yogic standpoint, okay, let me try to do this. Each chakra was originally conceived of as a different dimension. Little by little, shaman / priests / yogins began to understand that these experiences in the macrocosm